Hello again. It occurred to me that I'm feeling capable of continuing to vlog, and even though I'm splitting it up for viewing convenience in terms of time, there's no reason why I shouldn't do the next one and then just catch up by doing two in one day. So anyways, continuing on, I read through some of my testimony and I see where I forgot some things that did happen in the place that we were living at by the river before, he bought a house. So, actually, this is at the place in South London. So the place before that, we got in a very, very big fight, and he turned the place upside down. And at one point, he flipped the garbage upside down and like spread it throughout the kitchen, and then proceeded to make me lay down in it, and told me that that's where I was sleeping for the night. I didn't end up sleeping there the whole night, but I was left there for like, I don't know, 20 minutes or half an hour or so. So that was rather unpleasant. And I had a bad habit when I was younger of walking into a room and turning on the lights without thinking about the fact that he was in the room or someone was in the room beforehand, or like when I walked in. So there's a lot of times where I'd walk in and turn on the lights and it would really shock him because he'd be sleeping or resting or whatever. And it was very upsetting to him. So when we would get in fights, a lot of times he would just come in the middle of the night and flick on the lights and, wake me up in that fashion as like a how do you like it sort of thing. So yeah, that happened a lot. And then fast forward to the place by the river, around the time when he had been like beating me with the heater and what have you, like just as we were moving, he also had come in. um, I was sort of prepared for it, but he just sort of walked in, didn't turn on the lights or anything, and took a cup of water and just like dumped it on my head and then walked out and shut the door. um, so, that was fun, you know. Um, and that was just like a all-nighter fight of him like endlessly walking in the room and doing something again. And a lot as all this was progressing, it became like more and more made clear, or yeah, I don't know, clarified by him that he was in control and he was not going to take no for an answer. And if I said no or argued with him about any sexual act or anything, it was just going to make things worse and more violent. So yeah, there was no saying no to anything. Towards the very end, like once just like as I was running away and stuff, which I'll get into, was when I finally started fighting back. But during all of it, he really, like, he wasn't, well, yeah, well, until he moved into the place that I ran away from, like, where the house he owned. Um, Before that time, he was pretty much always just responding to an action I was making, even if it was an unreasonable response. It was never him just randomly doing something because he felt like it. So, because of this, I was very much made to feel that it was my fault and my responsibility for how he was responding, which is why I didn't fight back a lot of the times, because it was like I was being punished for something I'd done wrong. You don't fight back in those cases, even if it's too intense or wrong, I guess. Or that's where I was. I was in a very much victimized mindset. And feeling like I was getting what I deserved or what have you. But it was very routine that at the end of these massive fights that could last, like, I'd be left alone for periods of time, but they were brief and they could last days. You know, I don't know, upwards of like 3 days, 4 days of just constant fighting. But at the end, he would, you know, we'd reconcile, I'd say the right answers or whatever, and he would fix me up, give me ice, help me heal, get me homework packs from school, and, you know, life would continue. But yeah, then we moved to the place that he owned, and he actually happened to previously know the people who lived next door, so that was sort of interesting. It was just a little dead-end street, quite short, and across the street from it was a park, so there's not a lot of people around, which is good. For some of the things that went down. There was a hot tub in the backyard, and one thing I'm like quite ashamed of is that like at night, he raped me a lot in the hot tub. Like there's no lights to really show for anything, so he did that a lot. And there's also events where like there was a time we came out of the hot tub and were drying off, and then he got all turned on and ended up anally raping me. And then time after that, just before I was supposed to go on a field trip, I believe this was grade 12, with the guitar ensemble to Ottawa for a like one-time really cool thing that we'd been invited to, like competition or whatever. We got out of the hot tub and I was afraid of him doing that again, of anally raping me, so I rushed up the stairs because like there was, you walk in the back door and there was like 5 steps down and then like 5 steps up, and I rushed up the stairs to try and like towel off really quickly and get away, and then he came in and was very upset with me that I had dripped water all the way up the stairs and up to there and started asking me why. And I obviously started lying to like not want to just tell him what I was trying to avoid. And then he could see that I was lying and he started accusing me of lying, and then he told me to go to my room. And I don't remember exactly the transition after that, but at some point he ended up chasing me like while I was still naked, from changing out of my bathing suit. And then he had like a hanger in his hand and was like beating me with it and chasing me around with it. And at one point I remember him like, I got into this habit when I was running from him to run around the side of the bed and then jump over the bed, because then he'd run around to the side of the bed to try and get me, and then I jump over the bed, so then he'd have to jump over the bed and his jumping motion would give me time to run further. And I jumped over the bed and he like lunged and he got a hold of my hand just as I was coming out the other side, and like proceeded to start beating me with the hanger with his other hand as he was holding my arm with the one hand, so that was no good. And then I remember that I believe that evening ended with him, the way the bathroom was set up was like there was a nice big beautiful tub, and then there was a stand-up shower beside it. The shower and tub weren't connected, and so he had me in the stand-up shower, like I was on the floor, sort of crunched up in a ball, bruised and beaten, and he was putting ice cold water on me and asking me questions, and every time I gave the wrong answer, he would hit me on the head with the shower head. Oh, my head felt like an egg carton after that, like bumps everywhere. And then, you know, when I get the question right, he would turn the temperature up a little bit. Then I get the question wrong, I turn it back down to ice. There was another time. None of these times can now be consecutive, because this is something that's really an issue with trauma, is your brain just kind of implodes on itself in terms of like the abuse and when it happened. The only thing that's really allowed me to keep it consecutive, as I mentioned before, was where we were living and the different scars that I have. So yeah, that's interesting. But moving forward, we did travel a lot, like amongst Canada, Ottawa, Sarnia, Toronto, different beaches, Ippawash, Port Bruce, Port Stanley, Wasaga, went up to North Bay, Sudbury. He lives in Timmins, or was from Timmins, so went to Timmins, went to Sault Ste. Marie. We went over, did we go to Ottawa? I don't think we ever went to Ottawa. We went to Montreal together. Yeah, he brought me there, to Kingston, Scarborough tons of times, like Toronto area tons of times. Went to Bolton, where I'm from. Went to my elementary school. That was interesting. Went all over and fought during that time all over. And so there was a lot of times of people like seeing us and just being like, they'd come up to me and be like, "Are you okay?" And I'd always just be like, yeah, because it's an unfortunate truth that as an individual, you're not really helping a person. Or I mean, my experience was they weren't really helping me. They were making my situation worse because I didn't have anywhere to go, anyone to rely on, anywhere. Like, he was my source of food, shelter, and etc. And that's what an abuse victim is thinking most all the time. So when you're walking up to them being like, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" Like, you're not offering to like bring them into your home and feed them until they can find a job in their own place, right? So you're not helping them. You're actually just getting them in trouble with their abuser. So like seeing a person getting abused in the street, call the police. Like, that's the only way you can really help them, is by getting an authority aware of what's going on so that they can get some real help, some real access to resources, shelters, housing, shit like that. Like, just walking up to them is scary and gets them in more trouble with their abuser because they're not about to just walk out of that situation. They're in a victimized mentality. So that's not the thing to do. Or that's definitely not what I appreciated as an abuse victim. But, I mean, Canadians are really kind, and at the same time, like, it was so nice that so many people were concerned about me. But they weren't helping, coming up to me like that. There were some police officers, actually, that, like, ended up getting our we got the attention of, and they were like, "Hey, like, what's going on? Is everything okay?" And we just be like, yeah. And, like, he would sit down with me after and just be like, "All you had to do was say something. You could have like completely fucked me right there, and you didn't." I was just be like, "Yeah, I didn't. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. 'Cause I just didn't." I mean, I do love him, and I didn't ever want to get him in trouble, which was a main motivation. And so I guess I just wasn't putting myself first, because I really did want out of that situation. I ended up getting out in a different way, though. But anyway, another frequent occurrence, because we traveled a lot, was Petro-Canada beatings, where we stopped in Petro-Canada stops, which are along the 401, a lot. There's a series of them, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or so, or maybe more, between Windsor and Kingston, or maybe even as far as Quebec, I'm not sure. There's a series of them, and we went to pretty much all of them. And like, it was a relatively common thing to get beaten around like those parks in the middle of the night, and like kicked and punched and pushed and walked on and etc. Patched up in the bathroom and such. And then when we got to moving into the new house, we have shortly after that, I'm not sure how long, but shortly after that, he ended up buying a motorhome, sort of through help of me, sort of like money that he claimed was mine. And that's where this scar, you can't really see it, but one of the reasons my eyebrows are so damn small is because I have a scar here, so to make them even, I try to compensate. Anyway, there's a scar here because one time we were fighting, and he was sending me to the back room of the motorhome, and he pushed, like, I got to the back room and he like pushed me when I was on the side of the bed, and I fell and hit my head on the handle of the motorhome, uh, drawer for clothing. You know, there's drawers on each side of the bed, and I hit my head on that and like cracked it open, and like he's just like, now look at, you're bleeding everywhere. So, you know, covered it and like went to the sink and shit. Dealt with that. That was a good time. There's lots of times actually of him like throwing shit at me and it hitting my head, and then like I've got all kinds of scars that you can't really see because I have hair, and then just like blood coming down, like gushing down my head, and him being like, now look it, you're bleeding. Yeah, now look it, I'm bleeding. So that was great. Um, and as I mentioned before, like it was a very common occurrence for him to flip the house upside down, and when it came to the house that he owned, there was linoleum floors, and he would like take the utensils out of the drawer and just like toss them everywhere, and so there's all kinds of dents in the floor by now. Unless he's replaced it, there's just like tons of dents in the floor from that happening over and over and over. Flipping utensils, flipping chairs, flipping shelves, flipping garbage cans, as I mentioned. Like everything that can be flipped was flipped, not in a good way. And there's just a lot of abusing in the motorhome as well. It made like a lot more space for him to transport me around and abuse me, and that was a big part of my running away. But before I get into that, I'll just mention one more scar that I got. This is the only time I ever actually went to the hospital and got stitches for a scar, and we made up the most elaborate, ridiculous story. Like, they must have known something was up. But anyway, when I was in grade 12, I just graduated. It was my last day. So I just finished my last day of school in grade 12. I actually did grade 13, so I wasn't done, but it's my last day. And I was coming home, and I said or did something wrong, and he got rather upset, and then like told me to go inside, and then like, okay, so I went inside ahead of him, went up the stairs, and there's like a chair, yeah, it was a chair, by the washing machine set, which was right at the top of the stairs before you got to the kitchen, and I sat down at that, and he was upset, and he came up the stairs after me and had a bag of milk, and I just like turned to protect my face, but I turned towards the washing machine, which was beside me, as he swung the bag of milk at me and like bounced it off my head. The bag of milk didn't really hurt, but it caused my head to bounce off the washing machine, which did hurt, and ended up leaving that, which you can see in this camera, that scar. Yeah, you usually can't see it because I'm like, that's half the reason I have this hairstyle. Yeah. That's a good scar right there. Yeah. Needed stitches for that one. Left a good gash. And he looked at it and was just like, well, fuck. We have to get that stitched up. Now what are we gonna do? And so he sat there for like ridiculous amount of time with ice on it, being like, making up a story. And then he brought me over to the hospital, and I was still 17, meaning not 18, meaning a child, so I got to like skip the waiting line and go straight in because there was a kids area. And I don't even remember, but whatever. They always ask you what happened. We gave them a stupid story about falling from a chair and changing shoes or whatever, and then they patched me up, and away I went. And for like the next couple of days, he like tried to keep insisting that I like relax and take it easy, because I need to not stress so that it doesn't strain the skin and scar too much. And at the same time, I like could just see it, like he was starting to get upset and stressed over the fact that the dishes were piling up and shit wasn't getting done, and it's just, yeah, it's never good enough. But yeah, so that's where those scars came from. I guess I'll cut this one off before it gets ridiculously long. Too late. And excuse me, hopefully continue on later. But yeah, that's some of the abusive situations that happened in the house. A lot more happened, so I guess we'll continue on with that in the next one. Take care till then.